Appreciate y'all joining us. I'm Mark McGarvey. This is my wife, Lynn Campisi. For those of y'all who have been to our open house, we call it open house, but it's really a Christmas party every year. As you know, the coronavirus has changed a lot of our schedules and what we can do and what we can't do. Tonight we thought, for those of y'all that have been to the Christmas party, when you left, if you remember, we gave you a little bag, and in that bag it had some really good pralines, New Orleans based, made by a New Orleans woman. And they've been very much in demand. So Lynn is going to show you how to take step by step everything you need to do, the materials you need, the equipment you need, and how to make a praline right in your own home like a New Orleans based praline. And this is Lynn Campisi,
and my
wife.
Let's go. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Today, and I've been invited by Meld Financial to cook for you what we serve at our annual Christmas party for Meld, and that's our pecan pralines. You know, I grew up in New Orleans. I don't know if you can tell that a little bit, but I've been only in Birmingham, married to Mark McGarvey for 36 years, but I've decided to take as much as I can out of New Orleans to Alabama. And part of that's our recipe for pecan pralines. Now, we're going to try to do this today, and if you're going to try it at home, be careful because there were lots of trials and error that I'd have to call my mama and say, "Mama, I have boiled the sugar too long. What do I do with the pot?" Most folks will throw the pot away. But if you leave a hardened, sugared pot in the sink long enough, that sugar will melt. But we're going to try to give you some good tips today so that'll never happen to you. So why pecan pralines? Well, you know, in Louisiana, sugar is so plentiful. You have the brown sugar, you have the white sugar, and of course the pecans. Now, these pecans are probably from Georgia, and I know Georgia folks will be happy, but the best ones were from my aunt's backyard. Paper shell thin shells. You could literally peel it like in your fist, peel those pecans, and those pecans were just literally mammoth size. But these are pretty good, and this is what we'll settle for today. What I've done today is put all of our ingredients and then our supplies too, because that's always important, having to run for a can opener or a measuring spoon. Now, the most important thing I've got is this. This is an old-time club aluminum pot. Wooden handle, heavy bottom, not too high top because you want to be able to have enough heat from the bottom and insulate and keep that sugar warm. But the fun part about these pots never could go in the dishwasher. Why? Wooden handle. So these pots have been preserved. Fortunately, I've got 4 of them. You know, because way back in the 50s, I think somebody went down the neighborhood and sold everybody in my family a set of these pots. So I inherited everybody's pots because nobody wanted them. But I use this when I do my mass production pralines every year. So we start with our nice heavy aluminum pot. We have sugar. We've got white sugar and brown sugar. Now I make a nice double recipe, so I'm using 2 cups of each kind of sugars. I use the same measuring spoon. I don't mix it in the big container, but nobody's going to complain that a little bit of white sugar got on the brown sugar and vice versa. It's all going to mix up in the pot anyway. So I'm using 2 cups each. Now, we have evaporated milk, and that's what I like to keep handy is my old-time church key. See, I put Lynn on it so it never gets lost. We do a lot of cooking, and I've been invited to cook for the Birmingham Bar Association. We cook about 1,000 pralines every Christmas for the Christmas party. Don't know yet what we're going to do this year. Maybe they'll do it on a virtual delivery. But anyway, I have to bring all of my supplies. So here's my church key marked Lynn. So this is what we use to open this can. You always want to shake it up first, and then you pour it. When we're making recipes, one recipe, this is a cup and a half. So 2 cans always make 3 batches. So we love to run our math when we're doing our pralines. So we've got 1 cup of cream. Now, You don't have to mix this too much because it'll really pretty much mix and liquefy when it's on the fire. And we're going to hold on to this, and when this is all mixed together like this will go into the medium heat on the stove. But we're going to finish and show you what the other ingredients are so you're prepared. Now, once this mixture is on the stove and it comes to the boil, then the second part comes in, and that's when you're going to need some vanilla. I always have handy my half a teaspoon with the vanilla. I always use the pure vanilla, not the imitation, because that it's probably 10 times more the cost, but it's 100 times better to taste. So that's always the best. And of course, for our low cholesterol diets, grade A, salted butter. I'm sorry, but you don't want to cut calories on these. If you do want to cut calories, what I suggest later on the finished product, you take the praline, you chip away all the sugar, and just eat the pecans. So you're saving a few calories. So that's really good. But later on the boiling part, the butter, the vanilla, and of course the pecans will go in. The recipe calls for about 1.5 cups, and like I said, I think I like to go a little heavy. A cup, 1.5 cups, really means 3 cups. I want a lot of pecans in every bite when I eat praline. And so that's our basic ingredients. I also like to keep this little knife because in one of these batches, I use 1/2 stick of butter. So I'm cutting up my butter every time at the side of the stove. So next to the stove, I like to keep my butter, pecans. Now we have our ingredients, and they've been simmering at a medium heat, and we wait until it boils. And boil, for everybody's knowledge, in case you didn't get this in natural science, boiling is 212 Fahrenheit or 100 centigrade. So when it starts boiling, and our Candy Thermometer says exactly that, then we're going to add the butter, which is 1/2 stick. Put that in there. And then you're going to have 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Be careful, because when it's got a little bit of alcohol and liquid in it, when you put it in a hot liquid, it'll splash a little bit. So it's going to sizzle a little bit. You stir it lightly, not hard stirring, just stir lightly. And then stays on medium heat the whole time it cooks. And of course, the wonderful pecans. And the recipes usually call for 1 cup, and we just use a little bit extra. So I usually use 3 cups. That's my little bit extra. The key is you want enough pecans in the praline so that every time you take a bite of the praline, you have a pecan. So if you have a 5-bite praline, I want at least 15 pecans in it. So we mix those pecans. See, the butter's melting all by itself here. Be careful, this is hot liquid. You don't want to let it splash on you. Stir too briskly, because it'll splash and burn you. You're going to keep boiling it, simmering it on medium. And I kind of touch this, and is the sugar a little bit tight? Does it have enough pecans? It feels like it does. And I'll boil it a little bit more. But we're going to keep simmering it until it gets to about 238, 240. That's a softball stage. And there's a trick on doing this, and I tried to figure the trick out, and I haven't quite gotten it yet without a Candy Thermometer. But what you do is once the sugar's ready, when you pour it out, it's supposed to pour out in one stir. So you see how it's pouring out in several veins? When the syrup is cooked enough, it's pouring out a little thicker. So it'll simmer, and boil up in about 5 minutes or so. But you want to watch that Candy Thermometer, because what's interesting, it'll be sitting at 212, and all of a sudden it'll ratchet up to 220. And it'll sit at 220, and then ratchet up to 230. And then it'll ratchet up to about 235 and sit, and don't look away, because if you come back and you've not been stirring it, it could be at 250, which is way too hot. So we want it to get up there to 240. at some point. So we're going to make sure our heat's on medium. This is a gas stove. You can use electric. And again, you see the pot. It's a nice thick pot. I've told you a little story about these pots, and I've got 4 of them and proud of that. So we're going to continue to stir that until it comes to a boil. I think we're going to come back to this in a few minutes. Okay, now we've been simmering and stirring, and one thing I didn't mention before is I like to use wooden spoons. They're probably not the greatest, but I make sure my wooden spoons are only used for my pralines. I put them up clean and take them back out. And as you see, I've got a nice thick handle because you do a lot of stirring. You know, but at this point, you're watching to make sure that temperature doesn't ratchet up. You're waiting to get it a little bubbly. Like I had mentioned before, you want to make sure that it's going to turn out in one stream. It's almost coming there when you turn it down and it's pouring out in one little stream, maybe a little bit more. But you want to get it real sort of foamy, not too foamy, because if it's too foamy, you're going to have hot, stiff sugar in a pot that you're going to have to hold for a little while and mend the pot. This is at this point when it's about to ratchet up to 240, when we go to our next step. This is when Mark calls me on the phone and goes, "I need you right away." Anyway, that's always fun. And I say, "Hey, can you hold on a minute? I'm pouring." "Okay, got it." So at this point, see how it's nice and bubbly? We're right at the 238, 240. I like to get it closer to the 240 point. And at that point, and we're there now, we're going to turn off our heat. Okay? We're going to sit and wait a little while. I set the timer to about 5 minutes. Because what we're doing is waiting for the sugar just to cool slightly. Doesn't want to cool too much. Cool slightly. Those pecans are going to raise to the top. We'll come back and look at that in a second. We set this so it'll sit and set. So then I don't forget to come back and take it out of the pot. And if you'll see, we've also got other stages of the pots. When we really get going at Christmas, get going to the on Christmas, then what we've got is we have 3 or 4 pots going, and my buddy Pat Burris, my praline partner at Meld, we get this going pretty well. But this will sit and cool for about 5 minutes. You know, most important and the most critical piece in this praline recipe is getting an accurate read on the temperature. Now, if you'll notice my candy thermometers, these are a little ancient. And in fact, my good friend Ted Stuckensider from the Bar Association, my original thermometer wasn't doing too well. And he found several others just like mine in an estate sale. So he brought me one. But what's interesting is I've tried every single thermometer across the board. Maybe there's a digital thermometer that they've got since I've shopped for one. But this original thermometer is one my dad gave me. The little red ball on the side's a little burned, but you've got to be real careful and get an accurate thermometer. In fact, sometimes when we're all cooking, everybody has their thermometers in the pots, and they're all supposed to be accurate, but everybody's thermometers are, the range of temperature is 10 degrees. And that can be significant when you're cooking candy like pralines. Now, on this thermometer, and this is sort of funny, and Pat Burris and I always have a lot of fun with it, is the mercury in this thermometer has divided. So you've got a top bottom and a top mercury and a bottom to mercury. So not only you're trying to follow the degrees on what the temperature is, you're having to add the 2 amounts together to come up with the 238, 240. So there's a lot of math involved when we're doing these thermometers. A lot of math and a lot of fun and a lot of imbibes and a lot of tasting of different little holiday treats. We're going to get our surface ready to pour out the pralines because they've been sitting here on the timer for 5 minutes. And we'll show you that in a second. But I use freezer paper because it makes it an easy cleanup, and then make it even more easy. I spray a little Pam or cooking spray on the freeze paper so it comes up easily. And now it's ready. And if you're going to make multiple batches, I just reuse the same paper. You don't really have to respray it. Now, the pralines have sat for 5 minutes, and then the pecans have come up to the surface. So now it's time, and this is a tricky time, that it's time to pour. So you're going to stir it and whip it very rigorously, and that's when that thick spoon comes in handy, because you're going to whip it very quickly to mix up all those little sugar crystals and to help cool it. Now, you've got about less than a minute to pour this pot before it sticks. Right when it's got that gloss, it's ready to go. And then you're going to see these pralines as they pour out. And that's when the phone rings. Mark, I'll be back. I'm pouring now. The phone rings. You can't do anything else but pour these pralines. And we usually get about 25 to 30 in a batch like this. But you see how many pecans are in there? See how good that is? Don't get any of that on your fingers, because it's pretty hot. And then you got to scrape some of this from the top, because if it at least stays in the top of the pot, it'll get sugary. Now, as a trick, we'll get to the very end, because you got to work quickly. You got to strangle a dangling pecan. You just put more sugar on top of it and make a whole one. So you don't see any. See that little dangling piece? And then we are about done. But you see this last little piece of sugar? It kind of gets crystallized, and it may not be the prettiest piece. Well, if it's not too pretty, all I do is put that into the next batch, and it melts down with the sugar, and it comes out as pretty as the first. So they'll sit for about maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I let them sit maybe in a separate pan before I put them up in maybe a airtight can or airtight holiday tin. But we've got folks who are calling for pralines already. Is it that time of year? And if you're lucky, we're going to send you with some home today. Now, Kyle just asked me, how long does it take to clean this pan? I said, well, all you need to do is take that pan after you've rolled your pralines out, fill it up with hot water, and leave it. And then come back in about 10 or 15 minutes, and that sugar will just fall away from the pan. So easy cleanup. Later on, I'll make sure my wooden spoons are soaked in really hot water so they're ready to go next time. But don't spend a lot of time on the cleanup, because that sugar will melt away naturally. All right, like I said earlier, you can take that last one that just didn't look too pretty, and I call it the little runt. So we're going to reincorporate the runt. So we had two batches going from earlier, and we're going to put our two little runts in there, and they're going to become part of the next batch. Well, we hope you've enjoyed and learned a little something this afternoon. We've made several pralines, and we're going to have a little taste test soon. And before we end, I wanted to thank my sous chef, Pat Burris, who's always helping me on all the Meld events, because you do a lot of dancing in the kitchen if you're here by yourself. And as you've seen, there's a lot of steps you've got to stay in tune to. So thanks, Pat, for helping us today.
Enjoyed it.
And one more thing. If you're lucky to be a witness to pralines when they first come out, when they're first poured, the best taste is the warm praline that's just come out of the pot. So, Pat, cheers to you.
Cheers.
Happy holidays. The end.